Good morning, Rabbi Rabotai. We are continuing on Masechet Chagigah, and we are on Daf Yud Aleph, Amud Aleph, the last Amud of the first Perek of Chagigah, and we are continuing on the categories of the Mishnah. That after having the Porchot Ba'avir, things that don't have any remez in the Torah, and then Hararim Atluim B'Sa'ara, items, concepts that are like mountains hanging by a hair. Now we had the third category of Mikra Me'at V'halachot Merubot Yesh Lahem Al Ma She'yismochu. Things that do have a source in the Torah. Of course, everything that our Mishnah says are things that are shtickle b'di'evet. They're not fully mentioned in the Chumash. They're not like explained very well. Yesh lahem al ma she'yismochu means, well, there is something to rely on. There is something to hang your hat, so to speak, on it. There is psukim, there are psukim about that concept. So now the Gemara goes to explain the different items mentioned in the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, 2 dots, and the limud of Amud Yomi for Chodesh Nisan has been dedicated the refuah shelema of Sarah Rachel Bat Nora, that should have a complete refuah shelema. Amen. Also has been dedicated by Shahab and Sheraz Rabbi for health, happiness, and prosperity of their family. Should have much nachat from their children. Says the Gemara, 2 dots. Mikra me'at v'halachot merubot. Tana negaim ve'ohalot mikra me'at v'halachot merubot. Negaim, which speaks about the tzarat, mesorah, all the other nigei batim. You could have tzarat of bayit, tzarat of begadim, of your clothing, tzarat of the body. The Gemara says that's not mikra me'at v'halachot merubot. Mikra me'at, negaim mikra merubehu. There's so many psukim, the parashiot that talk about. Imagine Tazriya Mesorah. The whole thing, the longest parashiot of the Torah when you have together, is talking about negaim. Every little detail of negaim is mentioned in the Chumash. So Amar Rav Papa says Hachi Kamar. It's exactly the opposite, actually. Negaim mikra merubeh v'halachot muatot. By negaim you have a lot of psukim. V'halachot muatot, and you have a little bit of things that are not mentioned, that are halacha, for instance, Moshe Misinai, or they are things that are not described and explained in the pasuk. But alot is the other way around. Alot is mikra mu'at v'halachot merubot. They are the halachot of ohalot, are little psukim and many halachot. So the Gemara says, what's the nafka mina? Well, why would I concern myself with this difference? And the Gemara says, umay nafka mina, what is the difference? The difference is that if you have a doubt, if you have a scenario, a halakha that you're doubtful about, and you want to find the halakha of it, by negaim, you go to the psukim. Oh, Chumash Rashi. Everything basically is mentioned in the Chumash. So perhaps your question also is answered by looking at the Mikra, but by Ohalot is the other way around. If you have a safek in halachot of Ohalot, ayin b'matnitin. You take a look at the Mishnayot of Ohalot, because that mostly is mentioned in Torah Sheba'al Peh part of the Torah. Next part of the Mishnah was Dinin. Then you have the halachot of Dinei Mamonot, the financial disputes. Michtav Ktivan. Again, the Gemara says they are written. They're not Yesh Lahem Al Ma She'yismochu. The Gemara says no nitzracha ela lichdei Rabbi. Yes, you're correct, but there are certain halachot that are not exactly explicit in the Chumash, and therefore you need the Torah Sheba'al Peh, you need the Hachamim, like the halacha that Rabbi introduced, the Tanya, as Rabbi said, Nefesh, Omer nefesh tachat nafesh. The pasuk says you have to pay life under life, which means instead of life. Now, the full pasuk over here is speaking about when two people are fighting. There are really two psukim that the Gemara is going to be comparing with one another, and the second one is really the pasuk right before the first one. So it's a little bit, the order of it is a little bit the opposite order. The pasuk that the Gemara brings here is because the Rabbi darshaned this pasuk of when the Chumash says ve'im asoni here, and if there would be a life loss, ve'natata nefesh tachat nefesh, that you will end up paying a soul, a life instead of a life. What does that mean? Does that mean that you kill the person? Or does it mean that you have to financially compensate? Now, what's this story? Story is two people are fighting. One of them wants to kill the other one. They're like a real, fist fight. And they're at each other, they're trying to kill each other. So the wife of one of them comes in the middle to separate them, right? Old mistake. And she is pregnant. Oh, yeah. And so one of them wants to punch the other person to kill him. And by mistake, he punches her, right? So the Chumash has two scenarios of this. The first scenario is if she doesn't die, but she has a miscarriage. The baby inside the fetus dies. So in that case, Chumash says you compensate financially. The pasuk, I'll read you the full pasuk. You have it on the side of the Gemara. When two people fight and they hit a pregnant woman, and her child or children come out, that means she miscarries. And you don't have any life loss of the woman. Anosh yanish, he will be fined, he will have to pay punishment. Kasher yashid ala ba'ala isha v'natan biflilim. The way the husband of this woman will put on him, he will give in front of judges. That means you'll have, of course, the court determine the loss and the value of that child. If it was an IVF, it will be more expensive, right? It will be the value of a child, and he will pay. V'natan biflilim. Then the next pasuk says, that's where the judges are for. And the next pasuk says, "Ve'im asoni here." But if there would be actually a life loss for the woman, that means the woman would die. Then in that case, "Ve'natata nefesh tachat nafesh." Then you have to pay with life. What does that mean exactly? Does that mean you take the guy and you kill him? He didn't intend to kill the woman. He may have intended to kill the other person. So, the Torah says nefesh tachat nafesh. Maybe you should kill him. Or maybe it just means that you pay. So Rabbi darshans this pasuk. Says the Gemara, the drasha of the pasuk is nefesh tachat nafesh mamon. Ata omer mamon o eno ela nefesh mamash. Is it money or is it nefesh mamash that really has to pay his life? Neemra netina lemata v'neemra netina lemala. There are two times that the psukim back to back talk about netina, giving. And what are they? The first time it says v'natan biflilim, that he has to pay v'natan. He gives the money in front of judges. So that certainly is talking about money. And over here now says v'natata nefesh tachat nafesh. Literally, the next pasuk says v'natata nefesh tachat nafesh. So the comparison of netina the gizra shava male halan mamon afkan mamon. That just like over there by natan biflilim, we are clearly talking about a financial fine, a financial payment. Over here also is a financial payment of the worth of this woman, which will be determined by the bedin, and he will pay. This person will pay the fine of the mehaisha. So that's the drasha of Rabbi. In other words, there are certain things in halachot of mamonot, which is this ends up being, according to Rabbi, a financial payment, a penalty that he has to pay, a payment financially that he has to compensate, and that's dineh mamonot. And this dineh mamonot is not mefurash in the Torah. It's not clearly, explicitly mentioned in the Torah. Yesh lahen al ma she'ismochu. There is something to hang it on because there is a gzera shava. There is a drasha that Rabbi darshan to learn this halacha, but it is less than clear. You will learn the pasuk, as I promise you. People who don't know the Gemara say nefesh tachat nafesh means you killed a person, right? And that's what they will be doing in certain countries nowadays. That, you know, if the katzota they take all of the things that Chumash says in this parasha very literally. They will cut off hands, they will cut off heads, and they will do all kinds of different things because, well, in the Chumash it sounds like it. That's why you need the drasha of Rebbe, that nefesh natata nefesh tachat nafesh, the natata v'natan v'natan. That would be a drasha for a financial penalty. It's not vengeance, it's a payment. He damaged something. If somebody damages somebody's car, takes a hammer and smashes the car of the friend, it's not vengeance to go get a payment from him. And here is far, far greater than a car. You killed the person's wife. No, it means that there is worth. We're saying that you're not killing him. He's paying the demei nefesh, the worth of a person, whatever that would be worth. Now, every person will be assessed based on the capabilities that they had, based on what they meant to the family, to the community. Not every person is the same. Just like not every fetus is the same. Again, if you had a fetus after 5 times trying IVF and every time paying $20,000, so maybe you have to think about $100,000 worth of a baby versus a regular baby in a family that they already have 23 kids, and this was number 24. So maybe a little bit different, not to take away from the worth of a human life, but it's assessed differently by the business. So says the Gemara, avodot, the fact that avodot are considered also yesh lahem al ma she'ismochu. The Gemara asks the same identical question. Every piece of the Mishnah, the Gemara is going to bring and ask the same question. The Gemara says, Michtav ktivan, they are written. What do you mean, yesh lahem al ma she'ismochu? You have to give me an example of a case that is not explicitly mentioned in the Chumash, that we need a little bit of a drasha to understand the real meaning of the pasuk. So says the Gemara, Lo nitzrecha ela leholachat adam. It's needed for holachat adam. Now, what is this talking about? There are several different processes of the korban when you bring a korban in the Beit HaMikdash. Of course, the first is shchita, right? You have to do shchita. Then is kabbalat adam, that you accept the blood in a klesharet, in a vessel in the Beit HaMikdash. Then is holacha, and there is hakrava. Then there is the taking of the blood, and then there is the zrika of the blood on the mizbeach, and of course you have hakravat over there. Now, holacha, the taking, the carrying of the blood, is not a full avodah. It makes differences without getting into too many details of this in the halachot of kochim. It's not a full avodah. Now, how do you know that is considered avodah altogether? Even though that is more of an optional thing, if you're far from the mizbeach, maybe you don't have to do it, and so on. But how do you know that it's considered an avodah? Says the Gemara, the Tanya. We learn from a drasha over here that the holacha of the dam is also considered part and parcel of the avodah of korbanot. The Braita says, "Vehikrivu zu kabbalat adam." Now the pasuk says, the full pasuk, "V'shachat et ben habakar lifnei Hashem." You do the shchita, and then what's the logical sequence of what's going to happen after Shechita, immediately after Shechita. Right, collect the blood, you have to do Kabbalat Adam. But the Pasuk doesn't say Kiblu or Rekibel. The Pasuk says, Veshachat et ben habakar, vehikrivu bnei Aaron hakohanim et Adam. Vezarku, and they're going to bring it, they're going to bring it, carry it. Bnei Aaron hakohanim et Adam. They're going to bring the dam. Vezarku et Adam ala mizbeach saviv asher petach oil moed. And they're going to do the zrika of the dam by mizbeach asher petach oil moed. So says the Gemara, when it says vehikrivu bnei Aaron, it is not talking about holacha of carrying, bringing the dam. It's talking about Kabbalah because that's the sequence. You do the shechita, you have to do Kabbalat Adam. So why in the world would you use a verbiage that is very misleading? Just say v'kiblu bnei Aaron hakohanim et Adam v'zarku et Adam, right? Why do you use a verbiage that is holacha, hikrivu, when you are referring clearly to Kabbalat Adam? Says the Gemara, Lo nitzrecha ela leholachat Adam detanya veikrivu zo Kabbalah. That the Braita says when the word of the Pasuk says veikrivu and the Bnei Aaron HaKohen will bring the dam, it's really referring to Kabbalat Adam. They are accepting the dam with a kli sharet in the area that the shechita was done, and they're collecting the blood of the korban. That's what it means, the Pasuk. So if that's correct, why do you change the language, the verbiage of the Pasuk to say vehikrivu instead of vekiblu? Says the Gemara, ve'afka rachmana belashon holacha, and Hashem says it in the language of holacha to teach us an extra halacha. Now, first we pause for a moment. How do you know that hikrivu is a lashon of holacha? How do you know vehikrivu means taking to the mizbeach? Dichtiv, as the Pasuk says in a different place, vehikriva kohen et hakol vehiktira mizbecha. There, the Pasuk is talking about the limbs of a korban that go on top of the mizbeach, and it says vehikriv hakohen et hakol, that the kohen brings the limbs, the evarim, to the mizbeach and does the haktara on top of the mizbeach. So you see, vehikriv, the language of vehikriv means holacha, of taking the limbs and taking them to the mizbeach. That's what it means. So therefore, when the Pasuk says over here, vehikrivu, is the same thing. It means taking something from where it is to the mizbeach. It's holachat adam. Over here, it's talking about the blood of the korban. Over there, it's talking about the limbs. But from there, you learn that the word vehikrivu means taking it from where it is to the mizbeach. So says the Gemara, ve'amar mor, zu holachat evarim lekevesh. When it says vehikriv hakol, vehikriv hakohen et hakol, it is holachat evarim, is the carrying of the limbs of the korban to the mizbeach, to the kevesh, the ramp of the mizbeach. So says the Gemara, lememra de holacha lo tafka miklal kabbalah. It's coming, the reason that the Pasuk mentions the verbiage of vehikrivu hakohanim, which translates literally to carrying the blood from the place that the animal was shechted to the mizbeach, where it doesn't mean that. Vehikrivu means you're accepting the blood. So why does the Torah use a misleading language of vehikrivu when it's referring to really accepting, collecting the blood in the sharet, in the vessel? It's coming to teach you that part and parcel of accepting the korban's blood is taking it to the mizbeach. So even though that it may have some difference in halacha with the other three parts of the avodah, but it is still part and parcel of the process of the korban, is considered a part of avodah. And hence, the Mishnah that says avodah is yesh lahem al ma she'ismochu, and it's not explicit, everything is not explicit. This is one example of something that's not explicit. The language means accepting and collecting the blood, but it is hinting to the fact that the hikrivu, the actual carrying of the blood from the place of korban to the mizbeach, also is part and parcel of the avodah. Says the Gemara, taharot. Now, taharot also is mentioned in the Chumash. And that's what the Gemara asks. The Gemara says, Michtav Ktivan. They are written, the halachot of taharot. Gemara says, no. No nitzrecha ela leshiur mikveh. Part of every tahara, when a person becomes tameh, and you have a process of tahara. Now, regardless of what the process of tahara is, if you are a balkri, you need mikveh. If you are a zav or a zava, you need a mikveh, or really mayan, right? By zav, right? You need some sort of a body of water that you're going to do tevilah on, right? Mayan means a spring of water, what we call mayim hayim, that it's not just a mikveh, but it's more than a mikveh. There are certain tumot that the mikveh is not sufficient. You need a specific type of mikveh, which is halachic mayan. So we're not getting into that at the moment, but nevertheless, part and parcel of every tum'ah that's going to become tahara now is mikveh. And even though that you have a lot of psukim talking about the process of tahara, a lot of psukim, but when you ask yourself, what is mikveh? The Torah never says really what the mikveh is. Now, if you ask anyone around this table, they'll say, oh, 40 sa'ah has to be 40 sa'ahs, right? Where does that explain in the Chumash 40 sa'ah? It's not in the Chumash. The shiur of mikveh is not really mentioned in the Torah. Now, the fact that you need 40 sa'ah is that the oraita is that the Rabbanah is a massive machloket and a magnificent sugya to delve in, but nevertheless, it says, and that's one of the main sugyas in Shas that you need for shiur mikveh is this Gemara Chagigah daf Yud 11a. So says the Gemara, lo nitzlecha ela leshiur mikveh. The reason that's not clearly mentioned in the pasuk, and you need to say that this is a drasha still, and therefore yesh lahem al ma she'ismochu, they have what to rely on, but you need still Torah sheba'al peh, is because of this shiur of mikveh, the amount of water you need in the mikveh. That's not written. The Tanya, we learned in Braita, v'rachas et besaro b'mayim, the pasuk says, ve'ish ki tetzeh mimenu shechvat zera. If a person experiences this shechvat zera emission from his body, v'rachatz b'mayim, he washes up in mayim, et kol betzaro v'tameh ad ha'erev. Now, what's the problem? He washes himself in water. What does that mean? Can I go to a swimming pool? Well, we're not getting into that right now, but for men and mikveh and so on. But can I go to any body of water? Any amount, anything? Can I go to my bathtub? So it says the Gemara, no, because this is a little grammar 101. Because if you paid attention to the pasuk says, "Verachas et kol verachas b'mayim et kol besaro v'tameh ad ha'arev." B'mayim is very different than b'mayim, and therefore, if you'll notice that if the Baal Koreh reads b'mayim, everyone is going to yell at him, and an untrained ear would say, "Why you just publicly embarrassed this person? He just said be instead of ba. What's the big deal?" It is a massive deal because b'mayim means in water. B'mayim means in that water, that specific water. I am referring to one specific type of water. B'mayim is a short form of saying behamayim, in that specific water. So what specific water are you referring to that the Torah says b'mayim? So says the Gemara, v'rachas b'mayim b'mei mikveh. It has to be in a mei mikveh, et kol besaro, mayim shekol gufo ole b'ahem. that this is a water that a normal body of a normal person could completely be immersed in the water. You need that's the measurement of the cube, so to speak. Is well, not a full cube of 1 amma by 1 amma by 3 amot, and Chachamim measured that you need 40 se'ah for mei mikveh. So there you have something that is needed for every process of tahara, and it's not clearly mentioned in the Chumash. It's hinted in Ba'mayim, and the rest of it is Torah Sheba'al Peh. So Temeot, next piece of the Mishnah, Michtav Ktivan, is written in the Chumash. The Gemara says, no, lo nitzachai lechadasha min hasheretz. The shiur of becoming tameh, when you touch a sheretz, there are certain creatures that if you touch them bemotam, and the bodies, you become tameh. So says the Gemara, the measurement of what's the minimum amount of sheretz that you touch and you become tameh is not mentioned in the Chumash. Clearly, we need a drasha. The Tanya, the Braita says Bahem. In one pasuk it says Bahem. In one pasuk it says Mehem. What are the psukim? One pasuk says Ele hatemeim lachem bekol hasheretz. These are the ones that are tameh in the sheretz. Kol hanogea bahem. Anyone that touches them bemotam in their death, yitma adarev. You will become tameh. The next pasuk says v'chol asher yipol alav mehem. Anyone that comes in contact, that from them it falls on him, it will become tameh. What's the difference? Bahem means them complete. Mehem means from them. It means even a piece. So how do you reconcile these two psukim together? Says the Gemara. In one of them it says Bahem, Yachol bekulan. Can I learn from this that Bahem means it has to be a full sheretz? That if I touch a sheretz that's cut in half, even if it's a large piece, I will not become tameh. If the corpse is not completed, it's not a complete body of a sheretz, I don't become. He says, no, you can't, because Talmud Lomar Mehem. It says from them, which indicates even a little piece. So why, if he says Mehem, why do you have Bahem? If you have Bahem, why do you have Mehem? It's a contradiction. It can't be both. It can't be both, because you say Bahem, which means complete sheretz. Then you say Mehem, which means a piece of sheretz. They can't coexist, says the Gemara. Gemara says, no, they could coexist. You know what? How they coexist? It's giving you a shiur of minimum for sheretz. In other words, the Torah is saying, take the smallest shiur of a complete sheretz, and that is the measurement for touching any sheretz, even a piece. So what is the minimum amount? Yachol b'miksatan Talmud Omar Bahem. Haketzat, what does that mean? It's a contradiction. The Gemara says, no, it's not a contradiction. It's giving you a measurement that even if you touch a little bit of a sheretz, a piece of sheretz, if it's a measurement that it could have been a full sheretz, that is the shiur. Now, what is that? Shiaru chachamim b'ka'adasha. Chachamim measured it that is ka'adasha. Why? It's like a lentil. Why? Because sheker chomet techirato b'ka'adasha. What's chomet? What's the Rabbi article say? Skink? What? Snail? No. So snail, the smallest thing of it is ka'adasha. When they're born, when they're little, they're ka'adasha. You have a full creature sheretz. That is the shiur of adasha. So once you could have a sheretz, one of the sheratzim that could be as small as the adasha, as a lintel, that is the shiur. Even if you touch a piece, that would be the shiur. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Kizanav haleta'ah, is coming to teach you a tail of a lizard, because the tail of a lizard is a piece of it, which is like it. Because when it gets cut off, still it moves, so it has kind of like a life of itself. So it's not a full sheretz, it's a piece of a sheretz that has a life of its own, at least for a while. So therefore, that becomes the shiur. So it's machlok etarem. Says the Gemara, arayot, the concept of erva, what does that mean? Michtav Ktivan is written in the Torah. It's parasha arayot. Gemara says no. No nitzrecha lebito ma'anusato. How do you know that if you have a daughter from a situation of anusa, right? There was a rape in the community and a daughter was born. Is that daughter who is a biological daughter of the Me'anes, is that considered erva for that biological father? Is she part of the arayot? Now, if you really go through the psukim, it should come out that she's not part of the arayot. But we have a concept of a double gezerah shava, which the details of which I'll leave off you to see the Rashi or in your footnotes of the Gemara. There are double gezerah shava that teaches us that even that girl, which is a bito ma'anusato, his daughter from the anusato, from the rape, that will be considered erva on this person as well. We learned it. K'tiva Amar Rava. Rava says, Amar li Rabbi Yitzchak bar Avdimi, atya hena, atya zima. There is a gezerah shava hena from a woman that you have a daughter from a legitimate marriage, and from a case of anusa. Well, both of them says hena to compare those cases together. And in the onesh of serefa, it has zima. Therefore, it's a complete comparison to teach us from this double gezerah shava that bito ma'anusato is considered also bito, which would be erva. Hence, you have a case of arayot. That's not mentioned in the Chumash really clearly. Well, you need to learn it from Drasha, and hence it's considered yesh lahem al ma she'ismochu, but it's not clear. And the Gemara ends the perek saying, at the end of Mishnah, it said, hen gufei Torah. On the last piece, it says, hen gufei Torah. So Gemara says, wait a second. Hani in, hanach lo. Only this last category is gufei Torah, are the body of Torah, the important parts of the rest of them are not important. Says the Gemara, ela ema, hen lehen. Hen doesn't mean only this last one, but hen vehen. Both of them, whether the ones that are hararim ateluim besara, whether the ones who are, porchot ba'avir, whether the ones are yesh lahem alma, all of these are considered gufei Torah, regardless of how much mikra, how much psukim you have, how much explanation you have explicitly in the Torah. Torah sheba'al peh and Torah shebichtav are hand in hand. They're bound together, and therefore hen vehen gufei Torah hadran alach. Hakol chayavin, and Be'ezrat Hashem, Tzlika lan, Perek Rishon. We'll continue days to come. This deserves a little music. Yeah, right.